Okay, now I'd like to demonstrate some warm-up exercises applied to the guitar. So pick up your guitars again. And basically what I'm going to show you is a few exercises concentrating on the stretching and independence of the left hand, and a few exercises concentrating on the freedom and accuracy of the right hand, and then we'll combine the two. Remember, the goal here is not to develop mega speed, but really just to warm up your hands and get them comfortable so later on we can accomplish some bigger tasks. So first let's work on the first left hand exercise. I suggest that you start this exercise higher up on the neck, because once we get into some stretches, it's going to be a little bit difficult as you go down low where the frets are bigger. And basically, your right hand isn't really that important right now. I was playing the notes separately. You can play them as chords if you'd like. You can play them without a pick. It really doesn't matter. We're concentrating on the left hand. Make sure that the notes ring out clearly, because what we're really working on is the stretching and independence of your left hand. Also use a pretty strong pressure. Now what's happening here is that I'm playing on 4 adjacent strings with a basic chord shape. It sounds pretty ugly. In fact, most of these chord shapes sound ugly, so turn your volume down when you practice. And then we're taking the 2 inside fingers, 2 and 3, and we're reversing them like this. Then we're taking your 2 outside fingers, 1 and 4, and reversing them. And then taking the 2 inside fingers and putting them back to their starting position. The next step is to just move up the chord shape to the next string group. So between the A and the B string, and repeat the same motion, and then move up to the last string group between the low E and the G string, and repeat the same 4 chords again. Okay, what I just played is the continuation of the first warm-up exercise. Basically, when you're through, you're going to have a sequence of stretches that continue down the neck. So this is considered part 2. And what I did is I started in our original position, which was between the low E and the G, and we were in the 10th position, and I stretched the first finger down a half step and kept the rest where they were, and did the same sequence of finger moves. So in other words, then reversing the 2 middle fingers, then the 2 outer, and then the 2 middle again, and just continued up to the next string group, and then to the final string group again. All right, that was part 3 of the exercise. And at the end of part 2, we ended up with this position between the first string groups. Now what you're going to do is put your fingers back in order, and while leaving your 3rd and 4th where they are, stretch your 2nd down a half step. So we have this shape, and once again continue with the moves all the way up to string groups. Now for the final part. Okay, that was the final part. And if you haven't guessed already, what we did is we moved our third finger down a half step while keeping the pinky where it was. So we had this shape. This time the stretch is between your third and fourth finger, and continue with the pattern until we got up to the first set of strings again. And then all you do is you bring your pinky down a half step, which brings you to the exact same shape that you started with, but you're a half step lower, because we started originally in the 10th position, now we're in the 9th position. And that's the first warm-up exercise. Okay, the second warm-up exercise for your left hand is basically a variation of the one that we just finished. You can start in the 10th position again with the same setup, and we're going to do the same moves. Except this time we're going to do some different stretches with the left hand. And by the way, you don't have to arpeggiate the notes. You can just strum the chords if you'd like. Okay, this stretch was different in that instead of moving one finger down a half step, we moved the first finger down a half step and the fourth finger up a half step. So we have a double stretch between the third and the fourth and the first and the second. And then we did the same exact moves. Okay, now we'll do the final variation on this exercise, and this involves yet a larger stretch. Here's how it goes. All right, what we did here on the final variation is instead of just having a stretch between the first and second and the third and fourth, we have a half-step stretch now between every finger. So you do that by moving your first finger down yet another half step, and then your second finger down a half step as well. Remember when doing these exercises to make sure that the notes ring clearly and see just how far down the neck you can go by moving downward by half steps. Now, for all you crazy guitarists out there, there is one more variation that involves some super stretches. Remember, don't hurt yourself. As you can see, I started out in a lower position, which made the final stretch a lot more difficult. Let me break it down for you now. With this exercise, instead of having all your fingers on adjacent strings, we start with the two middle fingers, 2 and 3, on the two middle strings, D and G, and your first and fourth fingers on the low and high E strings. And then you just continue with the same moves that we've been doing throughout. The moves from here should look familiar. We move the first finger down a half step, and the fourth finger up a half step, and then the first finger down one more half step, and the second finger down another half step, creating a full step between each finger for the ultimate stretch. What I usually do is I play these exercises in sequence, one after the next without stopping. I start on the 12th or 10th fret and work my way down chromatically until I can't stretch anymore. Now let's turn our attention to right hand exercises, and you can give your left hand a rest.